He tries to stop a taxi to take him, but all the drivers ignore him because the money he wants to pay is too little, so the man was forced to walk on foot. While he is walking in the street, he meets a driver who came to him specifically and gives him a letter from a man named Jack. The letter says that Jack will not be able to meet him now because he has work and it is late, but he left him the code for his house's door so that he can enter and rest until he comes. Ryan arrives at the house, looks around, and gets shocked the house is very big and luxurious and standing alone in the middle of the forest. He enters the house and keeps walking inside, surprised by its beauty, until he finds a bottle of wine and decides to cook himself some food while waiting for Jack. After a while, he hears the sound of a car pulling in. He runs outside to see who it is and finds Jack, his old friend, whom he hasn't seen in 12 years. They hug each other and begin talking about the lives that separated them. Then we discover that both of them were classmates in a cooking course back in school. But fate played its game. Ryan worked in a small roadside restaurant with just enough salary to survive, while Jack worked in a big company that made dinners in the parties of the rich. The house they are in turned out not to belong to Jack. It turned out that the company he works for rented it because a big banquet will be held there the next day. Jack is the head chef of this event and responsible for everything from the ingredients to the menu. Jack tells Ryan that this job earns him many times more than Ryan gets in any small restaurant, especially since the clients he deals with are rich people with money that cannot be counted from every part of the world. The next morning, Jack took Ryan, and they went out in Jack's newly bought classic car. On the way, they stopped at a small restaurant in a quiet town where they met a girl named Alice. Alice used to work in a company but left the job, saying that she plans to travel the world with the money she has. Jack and Ryan told her that they are chefs and friends from cooking school. Alice asked them an embarrassing question: "Who of you is the better cook?" And Jack, as usual, confident in himself, invited her to the house so they could have a cooking challenge between him and Ryan, and whoever wins. The surprise was when Alice tasted the food, she liked Ryan's food more, even though Jack earns money 100 times more than Ryan. Ryan turned out to be much more talented in cooking food that comes from the heart. After that great meal, the three of them went down to the pool to have fun and sat talking about everything in their lives. Jack's name came up again, but this time about the expensive watch he was wearing, which has a big story behind it that we will know later. The watch that Jack was wearing originally belonged to Ryan. Jack won it from him in a bet 15 years ago, and since then it has stayed on his wrist. After that conversation, Jack and Alice decided to spend the night together and left Ryan alone. Sitting and thinking about the meal he had just cooked, he felt a strange feeling, a mixture of pride in what he loves and bitterness about life not going his way. The next morning, Ryan receives a message from a man named Rabbit, a man from the loan and debt people who has been chasing him for the money he owes. At that moment, we understand that Ryan's trip wasn't only to see Jack, he was escaping from people chasing him and terrifying him day and night. Later, Jack returned from the hotel after taking Alice back and told Ryan that he shouldn't go out again because he has work. As soon as Jack left, Ryan took the chance and opened Jack's still running laptop. When he looked at his bank account, he was shocked. Jack had 17 million from work with rich clients all over. But the biggest surprise was when Jack returned at night and sat to open his heart to Ryan. This man who had millions was speaking broken from the inside, saying that his life is empty and full of misery despite all the money. Ryan was planning to tell him about his problems with the people chasing him and to ask him for money, but when he saw the sadness in Jack's eyes, he kept quiet, feeling that the time wasn't right and that he should wait. But unfortunately, the next day Ryan woke up to a nightmare. Jack had killed himself. And instead of calling the police after what happened to Jack, Ryan sat thinking about himself and about the debts strangling him. Suddenly he took a decision: he will use the money in Jack's account to pay his debts. But the problem was that he didn't know the password for the account, so he had to hide Jack's body temporarily and decided to go to the bank himself to withdraw the money. He went and bought a fake ID online. This ID would be in Jack's name, but with Ryan's photo. The ID was supposed to arrive within a few days, but life didn't give him a chance. On the same day, he received another threat from the man chasing him, this time sending him a picture of his mother, saying that if he doesn't pay the money quickly, she will be harmed. This threat threw Ryan into a spiral of terror. He promised that he would pay $50,000 and begged them to give him 1 week only. From that moment, Ryan saw only one goal: he must get the money at any cost. The night came and Ryan had no choice but to get rid of Jack's body. He took it and threw it in a nearby lake. There was no way back. The next day, Ryan went to the same restaurant they had been in 2 days ago, trying to act normal, but he was surprised with another message from the man chasing him. This time, the threat was clear and direct: if the money doesn't arrive today, your mother will die. Ryan talked to the man who was threatening him and said, "Give me the time we agreed on." But the other man didn't believe a word. Ryan returned home, his heart pounding with fear, but he was surprised by something unexpected: a car parked in front of the house. He entered, not understanding who they were, and found 2 men waiting for him. The surprise: these 2 men had never seen Jack before and thought Ryan was Jack himself. They began asking about the banquet preparations and the menu. Ryan tried to calm himself down and answered them firmly, and he used his knowledge as a chef and his cooking experience. He saw it as a chance to save himself and asked them for part of the money in advance to clear his debt and save his mother. Finally, Ryan felt like he could breathe: his debt would be paid and his mother safe. But then the 2 men asked him for a strange and terrifying request. They told him coldly, "We want you to cook human meat and you choose the victim we will eat." The world suddenly collapsed. Ryan was shocked and unable to comprehend what he heard. At that moment, he understood that the company Jack was working for wasn't a normal company. It was a secret organization that made banquets for rich psychopaths who paid millions to eat human flesh. And from here, the real nightmare began. If the banquet failed and the food didn't please the guests, his end would come that very night. Ryan thought of escaping, but Imogen was watching his every move and blocked every way out. Imogen sat explaining to Ryan the situation he was in and said to him that the guests coming tomorrow are the richest of the rich in the world, and one of them might pay $500 million for a single dinner. And she continued, saying coldly, "We are a global network, which means if you think about escaping, your life will be in danger, and we will find you even if you hide under the ground." At that moment, Ryan understood why Jack killed himself. The man couldn't bear this disgusting work and was trapped inside with no way out. The next day, Maurice woke Ryan up and told him, "Come on, we have work." They took him to the church they had been in a few days earlier. There, they focused on a young girl walking with her grandmother and began following her until they reached a bridge. But while they were watching her, the grandmother entered a forest and Maurice and Ryan lost their trace. While trying to cover up, a young man who worked fixing car tires appeared. The boy was surprised and asked them, "Are you looking for something here?" The moment Maurice saw him, his eyes lit up, and he decided in that moment that this was the new target. He pretended that his car was broken and told the boy, "Come check the car, and you'll get a lot of money for fixing it." And as soon as the boy went under the car, Maurice pulled out his gun and got ready to finish him. Suddenly, the little girl and her grandmother reappeared with a local police officer. The officer approached and began asking them, "Why are you chasing this little girl? The situation could have ended in disaster." But Maurice was experienced, an old player in this game, and knew how to act in such moments. With complete calm, he pulled out a business card and claimed he was working in a big company coming to open a hotel in the area, and that they were inspecting the location. The officer looked at the card, believed the story, and let them go. When they returned home, Imogen was waiting for them, asking angrily why they brought only one body. Maurice explained what had happened and said that he had to give the officer his card to get out of the situation. When Imogen heard this, she understood the situation and immediately took them to the basement. There they dropped the tire mechanic's body and told Ryan to prepare the ingredients to start cooking. Ryan was trembling as he tried to act normal, holding knives and cutting the body while trying to hide the terror inside him. Imogen approached him and said coldly, "Don't forget the customer asked for a special request. You have to cut out his tongue." Ryan resisted with all his might, but there was no way out. He did what she told him. After a while, Maurice came down to the basement and helped Ryan prepare the ingredients. Both of them were standing, preparing the true hellish meal. At that moment, Ryan thought about escaping. He thought of taking Jack's car and running away at any cost. He drove only a few meters before suddenly hitting the gardener working in the yard. Maurice quickly ran to him, while Ryan tried to make excuses and said the brakes weren't working. But Maurice wasn't that naive. At that moment, Ryan had to confess that he had been planning to escape. The strange thing was that Maurice didn't get angry or even threaten to tell Imogen. On the contrary, he told him in a terrifying calm, "Listen, Ryan, nobody escapes from us. This company operates worldwide. We find anyone, anywhere. You are no exception. Ryan understood that he was already trapped in the cage and there was no escape. He returned to the kitchen, prepared his tools, and told Imogen that he was ready with the banquet menu. As night fell, the rich guests began arriving one after another. Maurice greeted them with a smile in the middle of the crowd. Imogen received news that two police officers were standing at the door. The atmosphere grew tense, but she acted quickly and decided to intervene, making everything seem normal to avoid suspicion. The two officers were Inspector Ruiz and Officer Gallo, the same ones Maurice and Ryan had seen. Earlier that day, the inspector pulled a photo from his pocket and told Imogen, "I am looking for this person, my nephew." The photo was of the mechanic they had killed earlier. The disaster was that investigations confirmed Maurice and Ryan were seen in the area at the time the boy disappeared. The inspector began asking, "Where is Ryan? I want to see him." Imogen tried to stay calm and said, "Come in. I'll bring him to you." They entered the kitchen, and the inspector started asking Ryan, "Did you see this boy before?" Ryan tried to avoid the question and said, "I don't remember. Maybe I saw him." At that moment, Imogen cut in and said, "Ryan has nothing to do with this. He's an architect in my real estate company." But the inspector wasn't convinced and asked, "Then show me the hotel drawings and the list of building materials." Ryan began stumbling in his words, speaking strangely and illogically, and the inspector's suspicion grew. The inspector decided to wait and meet Maurice to question him. The atmosphere was electric, and Imogen, knowing Ryan panics easily, tried to keep control and offered the officers some soup to distract them. Without them knowing, the soup they were drinking was made from the meat of the same mechanic they were searching for. The inspector sat in the kitchen enjoying the food, not knowing that what he was eating was his nephew's flesh. As he ate, he said, "This meat tastes different. What kind is it?" Ryan tried to hold himself together and said, "It's a mixture of pork and lamb." The inspector asked to use the phone and began asking Ryan many questions about architecture and hotel design. Ryan was sweating, unable to answer or keep himself together, the world spinning around him. Suddenly, new guests arrived, and the tension eased as everyone was distracted. Before Ryan could breathe, Imogen pulled him aside, her face full of anger, and said, "You are playing with fire. Act exactly as we tell you. Don't deviate from the script for 1 second." Later, the inspector sat with Maurice and questioned him professionally, but Maurice, as usual, was always one step ahead. He managed to trick him with convincing excuses and pulled himself out of the disaster. Before leaving, the inspector shook hands with the arriving guests. One of the guests, a Japanese man, invited the inspector to join them for dinner, but Officer Gallo had another appointment and said he would leave early. After a while, Maurice came to Imogen and said that an unexpected guest was at the door asking to see Jack. That guest turned out to be Alice, the girl who was with Jack before. Imogen tried to control the situation and told them to let her wait. Maybe she would get bored and leave. Ryan was shocked when he saw her. He wasn't expecting her to appear at that moment in the middle of his nightmare. Alice entered the kitchen, watching Ryan cook, and asked innocently, "Why isn't Jack in the kitchen with you?" Ryan's face changed, but before he could answer, she saw the watch on his wrist, the same watch she knew belonged to Jack. She began to suspect and feel that something was wrong, and decided to leave quickly. At that moment, one of the guests requested to meet Jack to congratulate him on the unforgettable food. This guest also made a special request, sashimi made from a human tongue. Ryan went back to the kitchen, and when he opened the fridge to prepare the tongue, he was horrified to find the mechanic's tongue spoiled. This meant the dish couldn't be prepared, and the guests would not let the night pass without it. At the same time, Alice came back saying that her car had broken down and she had called a taxi. But what happened next is obvious, you can imagine. Ryan prepared the sashimi tongue, and it's clear whose tongue it was. Alice couldn't escape, but Ryan managed to send a hidden message to the inspector, asking him to meet in the bathroom immediately. In the bathroom, Ryan finally broke down and confessed everything. He told the inspector, "The meat you ate was from the mechanic you're looking for." The inspector's face changed. He rushed to the sink and vomited. After calming down a little, the two sat thinking of a plan. The inspector told Ryan, "I'll say goodbye as if I'm leaving. Then I'll meet you in the basement and we'll handle this." The inspector pretended to leave but went straight to the basement. What he found was more horrific than he could imagine: bodies dismembered, torture tools, everything proving the place was a human slaughterhouse. He tried to call the police, but his phone was upstairs charging. Ryan had the phone, but in his terror, the inspector forgot all his colleagues' numbers. The only option was for Ryan to bring him the phone. The inspector stayed waiting in the basement, hoping Ryan would make it before disaster struck. But Maurice, who had started noticing Ryan's strange movements, grew suspicious. He went down to the basement to check, and the moment he saw the inspector standing there, he didn't hesitate. He grabbed the chainsaw and finished him in seconds. When Ryan came back, he found the inspector drowning in his own blood, his body thrown beside Alice's corpse. The scene was a true nightmare. Ryan tried to reveal the truth, but Maurice stood there as if nothing had happened, telling him coldly, "Clean this mess up. We have guests, and they can't see this." After the banquet ended, Ryan saw Imogen sitting at the laptop, everything running like clockwork. Ryan looked at her and said, unable to comprehend, "How do you do this and still laugh?" Imogen answered coldly, "I got used to it. Behind me is a very big company, professionals at making crimes disappear." The next morning, Ryan lay awake, unable to sleep, his eyes open, feeling like he was trapped in a nightmare with no escape. All that he had done kept spinning in his head, regret eating him alive. Then Imogen entered the room with surprising news. Many clients were pleased with his work, and headquarters had nominated him to be the head chef in a much bigger event, with a huge salary that would make him one of the elites. As a reward, she transferred him more than $4 million. But before Ryan could celebrate or even understand, she told him the next event would be in Africa. Suddenly, Maurice grabbed him without warning and injected something into his neck. Maurice told Ryan while injecting him, "This device will allow the company to track your every move anywhere in the world. There is no escape." At that moment, Ryan gave up. He had no choice but to prepare his bag. Who came to take him again? It was as if the story was repeating itself. Meanwhile, Maurice was erasing all the evidence burning Jack's cars and everything that could link them to the crimes. Everything disappeared. And when Ryan reached the airport, he sat among the passengers waiting for their flights. There he met a man who started talking to him, complaining about his low salary and the tough conditions in the hotel where he lived. The man looked at Ryan as if he was living in luxury, a successful chef, staying in fancy places, earning millions. But what the man didn't know was that Ryan wasn't enjoying any of it. Inside, Ryan was dying. The movie ends with him watching his freedom goes with a fake lifestyle covered with millions, but with no choice to buy his freedom.